Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Anja Geitmann, and I'm the Dean of the Faculty of Agriculture and Environmental Sciences and the Associate Vice Principal of McDonald Campus of McGill University. Welcome to McDonald Campus and to this building, the Centennial Center, for this very special event and announcement that celebrates McGill's Institute for Global Food Security and the essential work that is being carried out here. I am so pleased to see all of you here, alumni, donors, students, members of the McGill faculty and administration, members of the media, and special invited guests, all of you able to join us here today. And in order to avoid any awkwardness about the food, I do actually invite you to start eating your starter while I talk and while we are up here on the scene. I would like to highlight a few very special guests that are here with us today. We have the Mayor of Sainte-Anne-de-Bellevue, Paola Hawa, here today. We have the Honorable Francis Scarpaleggia, Member of the Parliament for Lac Saint-Louis and Chair of the National Liberal Caucus. We have Jeffrey Kelly, who represented the riding of Jacques Cartier as a Liberal member of the National Assembly of Quebec since 1994 until very recently, and until next week, the Minister responsible for Native Affairs. And we have Gregory Kelly, who will carry the Kelly name, clearly developing it into a dynasty. Recently elected Liberal MNA for the riding of Jacques Cartier. To all of you, welcome here. We're very honored to have you here. I would also like to acknowledge a few other special guests from whom we will hear in much more detail later, but I'm going to introduce them very briefly right now. Nikita Hamel is the Deputy Director of Policy and Practice in Agriculture and Food Security Division of Global Affairs Canada. Wendy Montour is the Program Officer with the International Development Research Center in Ottawa. Richard Morgan is the Executive Director of the Humanitarian Coalition in Ottawa. And we have here, of course, Dr. Melga Quinones, the Director of the Institute for Global Food Security and the Margaret Gilliams Faculty Scholar in Food Security. As I mentioned, we will hear from all of these later in a panel discussion. We are also very honored to have several members of the most senior administration of McGill here, including my own chair, or the chair of my own faculty advisory board, Bernard Poliquin, the Vice President, University Advancement, Marc Weinstein, from whom we will hear later on, and the Chair of Board of Governors, Ram Panda. But without any further ado, I would like to introduce the person who will give the next speech. And it is my great pleasure to introduce Suzanne Fortier, McGill's Principal and Vice Chancellor. I invite her to come forward. Professor Fortier is a native of Saint-Timothée in Quebec. She graduated from McGill with a Bachelor of Science in 1972 and a PhD in crystallography in 1976. Elle exerce des fonctions de principale et vice-chancelière de l'Université McGill depuis septembre 2013. Avant d'être nommée principale, la professeure Fortier a été présidente du Conseil des recherches en sciences naturelles et en génie du Canada, le CRSNG, NSERC in English. Professor Fortier is currently a member of the Canadian Business Higher Education Roundtable, and in 2016, she was invited to serve on the Canadian Federal Ministers of Finance's Advisory Council on Economic Growth. In 2017, she was appointed Vice Chair of the World Economic Forum's Global University Leaders Forum. And very prestigiously, she was named an Officer of the Order of Canada in 2018. Mesdames et Messieurs, veuillez accueillir la principale et vice-chancelière de McGill, Suzanne Fortier.
Merci Anja et bienvenue à vous tous. Mon Dieu, quel bonheur d'être ici ensemble pour cette belle célébration. It really is great and I'm thrilled to be here with you for this celebration. We are surrounded by many members and friends, alumni of our Faculty of Agriculture and Environment Sciences, along with students, as Hanya mentioned, many special guests, and we're all professors, member of the staff here, and of course we're on this beautiful McDonald campus. And this is for a special occasion and a special celebration. So merci à vous tous d'être ici aujourd'hui. You know, 10 years ago, 2008, the world was in the midst of a global crisis, global financial crisis, but also a global food crisis. We know that hundreds of millions of people were plunged into poverty and food deprivation as a result of these crises. And against this dramatic backdrop, here at McDonald campus was created the Institute for Global Food Security. The students, researchers, and staff of the Institute dedicate themselves to finding novel and sustainable solutions to alleviate the hunger and malnutrition experienced by over 1 billion people in the world. Their research, innovation, and international partnerships are critical to addressing this global problem and getting practical solutions into affected population. Today, at McGill, we're ready to take another very important step, a step forward in addressing food insecurity around the world. And this is thanks to the extraordinary generosity of a McGill graduate with a long-standing commitment to this cause. I'm very pleased to announce that we've received a new gift of $5 million from Margaret Gilliams that will offer transformative support to McGill Institute for Global Food Security. Let's have a big round of applause. Of course, we know that the gift will have a huge impact on our university, on our Faculty of Agriculture and Environmental Science, but most of all, on our ability to respond to one of the most pressing challenges at our time, global hunger. Maggie, you're such a great friend, and I want to tell you that on behalf of the entire McGill community, I want to thank you for this extraordinary gesture of support. Un grand merci du fond du cœur à notre Maggie. Vous savez, ce n'est pas la première fois que Maggie démontre son engagement envers cette cause à McGill. Elle a fait une importante contribution à l'Institut en 2012. Maggie est une grande amie. She's a longtime friend of McGill, and she supported our university for more than 55 years. Her motivation is simple and profound. She wants to do something meaningful to ensure that everyone has secure access to sufficient, safe, and nutritious food supplies. Her support reflects her belief that research can change lives. And this is, of course, part of our vision at McGill. It's part of our mission at McGill to take part in research that changes life. We are very fortunate and very grateful to be able to count Maggie for her support and her friendship. The gift that Maggie has made will propel the Institute to new level of excellence in research and in outreach, broadening public understanding of the complex factors that affect food insecurity. But perhaps more importantly, This gift will provide critical support to the new and next generations of leaders in this field. The students here on this campus who are working on the solutions to the challenges of food insecurity. And what better way to convey the importance of this opportunity for students than to introduce you directly to these generations of leaders, and we'll do so through a special video.
I come from Brazil and I'm at McGill doing my master's degree on human nutrition. My research is focused on how political and economic crises affect food security, so the access to food.
The research that I'm doing focuses a lot on forest and natural resources and how they can be used to supplement or improve the food security of rural households.
I'm working with anemic children in Ghana by incorporating insects in their diet as a source of iron and a source of protein as well.
I worked for 5 years in Brazil in the public health system. By the end of 2014, Brazil started to suffer from economic crisis and a political instability, and I could see how all of the budgets were being cut, reduced. We could see children, and not only children, elderly, getting sicker and demanding more services.
I think when it comes to insect consumption, we always hear that it's the future, it's a future food, but everyone is really scared to eat them. If I can prove that there's a way that we can incorporate it in the diet that is not only sustainable, easy, cost-effective, and that serves a lot of nutritional benefits, then maybe we can sensitize people to the idea of edible insects and insect consumption.
Basically, I'm focusing on wild mushrooms in northern Zambia and looking at how women gather these mushrooms and create social networks. The natural environment in Zambia is so diverse and vast, and that it could provide more than just maize. It could provide more vegetables that would better meet the micronutrient needs of the population. I was born in Nigeria and moved to Canada in '98 when I was 8 years old. It was really exciting being able to go back in this kind of capacity as a researcher, doing stuff that links back to my continent and to the land that I came from.
We have seen a program growing very, very fast, and I am happy to share that we have had almost 25 graduate students in the research group within 6 years. Funding from the private sector and from donors is crucial for us. Most of the things we do thanks to those type of donations.
So as you've seen on the video, we have great students here. We can give them a big round of applause. And I hope that you've paid great attention to the very last few seconds of the video, because we are extraordinarily honored to announce that the Institute has a new name. The Margaret A. Gilliams Institute for Global Food Security. The new name recognizes the transformative impact that Maggie's generous support has had and will continue to have on the Institute. Of course, it will allow the Institute to chart an even more ambitious course and open up new exciting opportunities for students like Luna, Neddy, and Lola. Neddy was unable to join us today because she's on a research trip in Zambia. But we're thrilled to have both Luna and Lola with us this afternoon, as well as Ugo and so many others from the Institute. And now I would like to ask Dean Anya Guidman to join me on stage to speak a little bit more about how this gift from Maggie Gilliam will advance the great work of the Institute. Merci beaucoup.
Merci, Madame Fortier. Thank you, Principal Fortier. As Principal Fortier has noted, Maggie Gilliam has been Miguel's key partner in tackling the global food and nutrition crisis already since 2012, when she made her first major gift to the Institute of Global Food Security. This was an initiative that was started under my predecessor, Chandra Madhurmuthu. It has now been more than 5 years, and in that time, thanks to her giving, the Institute has been able to enrich research, develop new teaching paths, and attract and retain outstanding students with robust graduate funding. And that is crucial at McGill, that we are able to retain the crème de la crème of the students. Today, the Institute of Global Food Security is recognized as an important center of expertise and a hub for innovative practices in sustainable agriculture. With this latest gift, Ms. Gilliam is increasing her support in a way that will allow the Institute to chart an even more ambitious course as the Margaret Gilliam Institute for Global Food Security. The gift will help shine light on the Institute's work, broadening public understanding of the complex factors that impact food insecurity, the depletion of non-renewable resources, armed conflict, pollution, and, of course, the effects of climate change. The timing of this event couldn't be any better, I believe, after what we read in the press in recent days. McGill's strong interdisciplinary approach to scholarship will allow students and researchers to examine these problems from a variety of perspectives, including nutrition, land and water management, environmental sciences, economics, health, nutrition, and social sciences. And only by looking at this challenge from multiple angles will we actually be able to resolve the problems associated with it. The Institute will also expand to play a managing and liaison role for national and international projects. Already, its investigators are partnering with governments, private sector groups, foundations, and external agencies. They have developed more precise methods to measure food insecurity, which have been adopted by the United Nations Food and Agricultural Organization, FAO. Ms. Gilliam's gift will enable the Institute to become a world-renowned leader in research management, innovation, and knowledge transfer related to food security, and in this way becoming a major actor in policy making. And again, that is crucial. All the research in the world is fine, but unless you actually implement it and translate it to a tangible impact, you might as well not do it, right? We are tremendously thankful for her visionary support that strengthens our faculty and allows McGill to play an important role in one of the grand challenges of the 21st century as it embarks on its own third century. I would now like to ask Maggie to come forward to accept a very small token of McGill's appreciation. Maggie, I have to get closer to the microphone. I'm very pleased to present you this token of our gratitude. It's actually a copy of the plaque that will be on the building that houses the Institute. So with the new logo on it and your name on it, of the Margaret Gilliam Institute, for you to take home as a souvenir from this event.
Well, I'm very grateful and very proud, actually, to be part of this great event. And it's wonderful to witness the very fancy, and it's very nice indeed. Thank you.
Thank you. We would like to take pictures. If you
Okay.
It could not have happened 50 years ago.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Marc Weinstein. I'm the Vice Principal of University Advancement at McGill University. Today, I have the enviable role of telling you a few things about our guest of honor, Margaret Gilliam, or as she likes to be known, Maggie. Maggie is someone who has forged her own path to success. From an early age, her courage and her tenacity have shaped the course of her life and her career. And she has had her share of obstacles to overcome. When she left her home in British Columbia and traveled across the country to study science at McGill, Maggie had her heart set on eventually becoming a doctor. But her uncle, who was a pediatrician, felt that this was no career for a woman. So she had to set her sights on a new path. After taking a course in money and banking, Maggie found her path. She applied and gained acceptance to the Harvard Radcliffe program in business administration. Upon earning her business degree, Maggie landed a position working as an analyst at Goldman Sachs. She was only one of a few women working on Wall Street at the time. Maggie became fascinated with the retail industry. Over the course of her career, she honed her skills as a global retail analyst and became a much sought-after consultant and advisor to industry giants such as Walmart, Home Depot, Nordstrom, and Costco. I think we can all agree that these companies have done all right by Maggie's advice. But as anyone close to Maggie knows, her stellar career is just one aspect of a full and successful life. She is an accomplished and award-winning ballroom dancer, and she has an amazing eye for fashion, as we witnessed today. I have not yet mentioned Maggie's most impressive trait, and that is her loyalty. She's a long-standing champion of McGill and has been a director of the Friends of McGill chapter in New York City since 1995. She's also been a loyal donor for more than 55 years and is a member of the James McGill Circle, which recognizes our university's most generous benefactors. Thank you so much, Maggie, for your friendship, your vision, and your loyalty. You've done so much for McGill. The impact of your generosity will be felt for years to come through the newly named Maggie Gilliam Institute for Global Food Security, and most significantly through the generations of students and young researchers who will come through this campus for years to come and who will go on to leave their own imprints on our planet. Again, mille merci, Maggie. Thank you so much. As we heard earlier from the Dean, researchers in the Institute for Global Food Security are working to understand and ultimately solve the complex issues that impact the global food and nutrition crisis, a crisis that impacts 1 in 9 people living on our planet. Today, we are delighted to have a group of experts in the field of global food security who will be offering up their perspectives on how we can feed a hungry planet. Moderating today's discussion is our Dean of the Faculty of Agriculture and Environmental Sciences, Professor Anya Geitman. In addition to her role as Dean and Associate Vice Principal of McDonald Campus, Professor Geitman holds a Canada Research Chair in Biomechanics and Plant Development and is a professor in the Department of Plant Science. Following postdoctoral research at l'Université Laval and at the University of Wageningen in the Netherlands. I actually went on YouTube to watch it 3 times and I still can't pronounce it. She worked as a professor at the Department of Biological Sciences of the Université de Montréal and as a scientist at the Institut de Recherche en Biologie Végétale before joining McGill University in 2015. And now, our panelists. Nikita, right next to Professor Geitman, Nikita Erickson-Hamel is Deputy Director of Policy and Practice in the Agriculture and Food Security Division of Global Affairs Canada. His team of policy analysts and technical specialists provide strategic policy advice and technical guidance to the department's agriculture and food security programs. Mr. Erickson-Hamel has a background in environmental engineering, ecological agriculture, and soil science from the University of Waterloo and Wagens. You see there's a trend here. Wageningen University and McGill. Welcome, Professor Eric Hamel. Next to Eric, or 2 places from Eric, is Wendy Manshur, is a program officer with the International Development Research Center, an Ottawa-based organization that develops and implements programs related to resource management, rural poverty, and agriculture and food security. Ms. Manshur has more than 20 years of experience working in international development and managing research projects related to agriculture and food security in a career that has taken her to Mexico as well as 7 African nations. Welcome. Next to her is Richard Morgan. He's the Executive Director of the Humanitarian Coalition. The Ottawa-based organization coordinates the humanitarian responses and resource mobilization efforts of 7 member agencies, including Canadian Lutheran World Relief, Care Canada, Islamic Relief Canada, Oxfam Canada, Oxfam Quebec, Save the Children Canada, and Plan International Canada. He has worked extensively with government, the media, business, nonprofits, the community, donors, and volunteers. And last but not least, to the far right, is our 4th panelist, Dr. Miguels Gift, Director of the Gilliams Institute for Global Food and Security, and is also the Maggie Gilliams Faculty Scholar in Food Security and a professor in the School of Human Nutrition. He has been at McGill since 2012. Dr. Miguels Gift has been a professor in the Department of Human Nutrition at The Ohio State University and worked in public health, nutrition, and food security research at the University of California and at the Mexican Institute of Public Health. And he just told us this afternoon that he also was, previous to this, a surgeon, but that's for another day. With that, I'm delighted to invite Professor Geitman to formally conduct the panel conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, VP Weinstein. So what we thought today is that we talk about the topic that we have mentioned for the last couple of hours, and I think the irony will not escape to any of us that this panel discussion will occur while you eat a most delicious and probably highly caloric dessert. While you do that, we will talk about hunger. In 2050, predictions say we will be a population of 9 billion, if not more. And I'm going to put you on the spot right now. How are we going to feed these people? Nikita.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here at McGill. I always like coming back and have fond memories of my time here at McDonald campus. Tough question. I was hoping I could ask that question and get the ideas and solutions from McDonald campus, but it's a tough question. I think we need a bit of context first. For the past 40 years, development assistance, we've seen a tremendous decrease in poverty across the world and a tremendous decrease in the proportion of human race that is hungry. Now, correctly, over the past couple of years, we've seen a reversal in trends and an uptick in the number of hungry. That's alarming. And like you pointed out, there's going to be even more mouths to feed over the next couple of years. So what does that suggest? I think the singular approaches we've used the past 30, 40 years are no longer valid. And so we need to move beyond disciplinary, even move beyond multidisciplinary and embrace transdisciplinary approaches. That means a broader set of political, economic, and social tools. In particular, around food, when it applies to food systems, it's about our behavior around diet and how we eat. And so the Government of Canada recently launched our new Feminist International Assistance Policy. And it was a great consultative piece of work that puts women at the center of our work and focusing on the roots of gender discrimination, gender equality, and women's empowerment. Recognizing that women are the custodian of household nutrition. And working through women, we'll be able to create that behavior change at the household level. And it's going to be a complex, difficult challenge. And embracing this complexity in agriculture means adopting multifunctional models of agriculture. So an agricultural model that achieves multiple objectives at the same time. One's productivity, producing more food. Two, creating jobs and income, particular for women. Three, agricultural models that increase nutrition, so finding ways to introduce nutrition-sensitive approaches into agriculture. An agricultural model that's also resilient to climate change, so we can get into the climate change adaptation, but also economic shocks. And finally, agricultural models that empower women and provide the leadership opportunities for women to own and use their resources as they see fit. And I think if we go down that path, we'll have a much better hope to achieve and reduce global hunger.
Thank you, Nikita. You already raised a lot of points that I wanted to go into. And one of them is that you use the two words food and nutrition, which are not synonymous necessarily. So what is it that actually has to happen in order to nutritiously feed people, 9 billion of us, in a few years? Wendy, did you want to chime in?
Sure. Yes. I guess from the IDRC perspective, we focus a lot on innovation and experimentation and really looking at relevant and appropriate innovations to address food security needs. And that starts with looking at what is the problem at the scale that you're looking to address that at, and who are you trying to reach, and make sure those innovations are relevant and affordable and appropriate to reach that population. And we've talked a lot we've just closed, some of you were there last week. We had a large event that we just had a very large wrap-up last week on the Canadian International Food Security Research Fund that focused a lot about scaling innovations. When you have an innovation that works, how to make that reach something that's successful and it is working at a local level, how to take that to more people. And a lot of research is focused on the how-to, but we've learned from our 5 years in our second phase of our program of really thinking about responsible scaling. And that involves thinking about the trade-offs, because when you take something bigger, there's often winners and losers in that process, and the losers are often the most vulnerable and food insecure. So to think about trade-offs when you scale, and also think about the optimal scale, because not everything is meant to scale, or not everything is meant to be taken. A successful innovation isn't always meant to be taken at a large scale. For example, I'm just thinking about one particular innovative project that we had in Cambodia on homestead food production, was working with communities, looking at diversifying their vegetable production for more nutritious food, and also combining that with fish ponds, so growing small fish for local consumption and large fish for sale. And they've scaled this out to a number of more communities, and it's had an incredible positive impact on the nutrition that's been tested. They've had baselines, and it's been working, and are considering scaling that beyond. But at one point, you have to consider at what scale. When it starts to degrade the environment and affect soil quality, water quality, then it's having a negative impact on the environment. So in some of the results we've been considering is just keeping in mind relevant and appropriate innovations, thinking about optimal scale and who you're focused on.
Thank you, Wendy. You used a term that I think you already illustrated with a great example in other countries, right? Innovation and scaling up. Do we have a Canadian example of innovative approach to feeding people, especially in regions where we might have challenges, such as in the north, where innovation has made or has the potential to make a difference? Richard?
Well, I was actually going to punt that one over to Ugo, but from an innovation perspective, I should say that I come at the question from not necessarily looking ahead to the 2050 perspective, but much of the work that our member agencies do is on the spectrum. Some refer to it as a nexus between humanitarian response and longer-term development issues. So I'm worried about how do we feed people in 2050, but a lot of our work is focused on how do we help feed people right now. And I think, as Nikita mentioned, we were achieving some great progress. At one point, I think in 2005, the number of undernourished people was about 954 million. That dropped over a number of years to 2014, I think, where we had plateaued at 784 million, and now we're back up to 821 million. So I think we have to ask ourselves the question right now: why is it that people are hungry in a world that, in fact, has enormous and plentiful resources? I don't want to conflate the two things, but you have that 821 million undernourished people at the same time, so 1 in 9 people on the planet, at the same time as we have 1 in 8 people who are obese. I'm not just saying you transfer it, but it speaks to the greater dysfunction, not just in the food production side, and often when we talk about hunger, our immediate response is to think about production. But there's clearly a bigger problem. That the issue isn't the lack of food. The issue is the lack of access, lack of distribution, definitely lack of production in certain areas, and fundamentally a lack of equity. And so I think we have to tackle across that range of problems. And I was particularly excited to hear from some of the students' projects. I was grateful, Lola, that we did not have the locusts in, well, maybe you do now, but we were spared the locusts. But I like the intersectionality that you're bringing to your work, because that's so critical to not just be talking about production, but looking at all the aspects that affect the food system, both now in terms of feeding the hungry and also looking ahead to the decades ahead. So I'll leave it at that, and there's lots more that we could say in terms of what's happening at the bottom, scaling up in terms of innovation, but it would be remiss of us not to talk about the important system-wide, political-wide issues that absolutely have to be paid attention to if we're serious about solving hunger both now and into the future.
Thank you, Richard. Hugo, you wanted to chime in on the question of innovation and scaling up.
Certainly. Well, I do think that as we experienced last week in Ottawa, there are many different kinds of innovations that have shown a positive impact and are effective when we do the studies either in the lab or even community-based studies. Through the scale-up experience that IDRC-funded projects had throughout the last couple of years, and a couple of us in this faculty were lucky and fortunate to be part of those projects. The challenges vary, and there are a lot of positive impacts, but as you mentioned, many different impacts that we didn't expect to happen, and we might say they are not necessarily the ones that we would like to see happening. Now, I do think that there's an element that was part of the discussions we had last week, and some of you mentioned this component that has to do with the community-based experience. The community-based experience that is there accumulated not only as knowledge, but also as wisdom. And many of the projects that are successful in trying the innovations, testing the innovations, and scaling up the innovations are successful because they incorporate that wisdom, that experience, those calls for warning. Be careful here, because people might have tried already a couple of times, some time ago, and they know some things work in one way but don't work in a different way. There is another element, and Nikita was referring to some of the dimensions that we think are central to food security: the availability of food, the access to food, the utilization of food, the nutritional aspect of food. One of the aspects that we have been discussing more and more refers to the dimension of stability, the social stability, the economical stability, the ecological stability, the political stability. And when we think about the challenges that food security is facing in terms of climate change, in terms of conflict, and Richard, you were mentioning that increase that we are seeing for the last 2 years, the connections that United Nations and others make to that increase in the number of undernourished people is to conflicts, increasing conflicts and challenges on the rise to climate change. And so while developing or trying, promoting innovations, scaling up those innovations, that element of stability, which in my perspective is the foundation of the whole house of food security, has to be incorporated.
Thank you, Hugo. I want to come back to a term that you mentioned, Wendy, and that is the environment, and the challenges when scaling up something that is initially benign can actually become a challenge. In sustainability research, we often talk about benign by design, right? To actually try and anticipate what could be the negative effects on the environment if we scale up something. So what kind of research needs to be done in order to ensure that any future measures that we take and that on paper sounded really fantastic for a small scale might actually cause big problems if we either scale them up or bring them to a place where they are not suitable? What is the research that needs to happen?
I think a large part of it is focusing on partnerships as well. After you've identified the problem and considered the problem you want to focus on and the scale, the optimal scale at which you want to do that, it's critical to, as Hugo was mentioning, also starting with farmers, from the farmers' perspectives, but considering almost doing an assessment of all those along the line to achieve the solution, who needs to be involved, and critical to do that at the earliest stages as possible. Just at the end of this food security fund, some of our lessons around that we're developing a shared vision together with all the partners, bringing them all together from the start. Also supporting the management process of research along the way, not just the research and the impacts, but making sure everybody's working together and functioning and communicating. Clear and open communications, all the roles and responsibilities are really clear. Considering gender considerations in all of the work that is done, not just having a gender strategy as an add-on to a research project, but considering gender throughout the entire process, making sure you have the capacity in the teams, that there's gender analysis capacity in the teams, that you have a research budget for it, that you're looking at the design and the strategies of the project from a gender responsive viewpoint as well. I guess, and considering monitoring and dissemination. So taking note of all the challenges and the hiccups that go along the way, reporting those, not being afraid to report on those, and learning from those challenges.
Could you give us an example of a concrete project so that the audience understands better what kind of implications that might have?
Well, one of our very large ones, I'll mention on double fortified salt. So it was focused on fortifying. A lot of the salt that we eat is fortified with iron, and in many countries it is. This was looking at also bringing in iodine as well into salt in India. So it was working with researchers actually who were based at the University of Toronto and actually did the double fortification through the University of Toronto, and then took that to and worked with the private sector, a group called JVS Foods, I believe, in India. And it was actually working with a private sector company who had already been working on food fortification. And so they transferred their facilities to work on double fortified salt to address anemia issues, which affect particularly women, pregnant women, which affects children and stunting and growth of children in India. So they were trying to address this problem as one element, looking at how to get double fortified salt out into India. And they worked with, interestingly, the public distribution system. So worked throughout the government, the existing public distribution system to spread staple foods out throughout the country, and managed to reach, by the end of the project, about 50 million people in India by working with researchers in Canada, researchers in India, private sector, and also the government of India. Uttar Pradesh was the state government they started working with, and they expanded to a few other states in India. So that's looking at a problem, which was anemia, how to address that through food fortification, but working in partnership with all these different stakeholders. But just to mention, that was a very long process that was building on a long-term relationship that had been built over 20 years. So some of these things do take a long time to achieve.
This is very helpful to understand for us what kind of impact this kind of research can have. Let's put our mind 10 years forward. Where will we have moved the needle if everything goes as well as we can possibly imagine now? What could we actually be doing with the technology that we have today, the expertise that we have today? Where do we want to be 10 years from now? Nikita.
Wow. That's actually sort of what we're doing internally as well, thinking forward as to from now to 2030 as to how we're going to address SDG 2, which is the Sustainable Development Goal on to achieve zero hunger. I think just kind of going on the same vein as where I started, it's going to involve complex approaches and a range of different models. Global hunger now is no longer sort of right across countries. There's certain hotspots of hunger within countries, within regions, even within cities. And then there are the persistent hunger issues, which are largely political, economic, and conflict issues in certain countries. So it's we're going to need a range of approaches. I think to push the needle on production, we're going to have to make high technology innovations accessible for different levels of farming. So make it accessible to smallholder agriculture systems, but also medium and large scale farming. I think there's all scale farming is the solution for global hunger. On the resilience side, we're going to have to make farming much more resilient. There's going to be a lot less stability in global food supply. As much as we can make systems adaptable to climate change, it will not prevent losses. And so what we need there is an efficient market, a global trade in agriculture that is open so that and it can be subnational. It could be about moving food from southern Ethiopia to northern Ethiopia. It can be moving food across borders in West Africa or moving rice from Vietnam to Africa. So to get where we want to in 2030, we need to embrace high technology innovation at different levels of farming. We need to embrace a much more open agricultural trade system at all levels, subnational to international. And also we need to embrace that behavior change at the family level. So the gender equality, the women's empowerment at its very core, in the kitchen. So that women are empowered to use the resources, agricultural resources, and the resources to provide the food that they want.
Richard?
Just to pick up on what Nikita was saying, but maybe a slight disagreement, only in terms of focus. So I would say if you're to give you two sort of words to take away, I'd say the word tea, and I'd say the word supper. So by tea, I'm thinking of not so much the drink, but I do like a cup of tea, but I'm thinking of targeted our work and our focus have to be targeted on where is food insecurity at its worst. And certainly if you're looking at the stats, you're looking at Africa where 20%, 21% food insecurity, 256 million people. You're looking at large parts of Asia where, while as a percentage of population it may only be 11.4%, it's still 550 million people. So I think we have to be targeted. I think we have to focus on, Nikita referenced all scales, and I agree on the all scales piece, but I think we have to be targeted at focusing the small scale, small shareholder production. And that's particularly, I think, where you see a lot of women in agriculture. Women make up, I think, Wendy and I were having a disagreement on the stats, but globally, I think women represent about 43% of agriculture. It's well over 50% in parts of Asia and sub-Saharan Africa. And so you have to be targeted in terms of focusing on those small shareholder agriculturalists. You have to be focusing on the empowerment of women. And looking ahead to 10 years, picking up on Nikita's point again, I do think you're going to see a growth in terms of the investment in women. So if you invest in women's agriculture, certainly some research has shown that you can decrease child malnutrition by 43%. Women will tend to put 90% of what they earn by way of income back into their households. Men tend to be more like 30 or 40%. I assume it's going on beer and soccer, but I could be wrong. But there's clearly an impact by focusing on women. And you mentioned climate resilience, critically important, because I think conflict is a huge piece, and climate, I would say, are the two major drivers of instability that are displacing agriculture. So for us, last year, the hunger crisis in parts of northeast Nigeria, Ethiopia, Somalia, Kenya, Yemen especially, you're looking at areas that are suffering from conflict, and that conflict is leading to displacement of agriculturalists, and so now you have food insecurity. Getting at conflict, those ones were also exacerbated by climate. Of the 50 or so countries that had major food insecurity, 34 of them last year had climate shocks to them. So climate is playing an increasingly important role. And so some examples of how does innovation get at that. CARE Canada, that I'm happy to see one of our member agencies is collaborating with the Gilliams Institute here on some research. And they're looking at intercropping, they're looking at staging crops at different times of year to see how you might be able to catch different seasons and rainfalls to be able to at least get some possibility of some sustainable crop for that sort of small shareholder food security situation. And so then that becomes something you can work at scaling up. But again, I'd say T is the one. The other one, supper, has got to be sustainable. It's got to be productive, and it's got to be profitable. There's no point having production if it's not leading to profitability for the small-scale farmer. It's got to be equitable in terms of empowering women, and it's got to be resilient to address climate.
Thank you very much, Richard. Before we wrap this up, I want to launch a last question to you. So the Miguelium, the newly minted Maggie Miguelium Institute, has as mandate a dual mandate, really. One is research, to execute research projects. The other one is education. This is what we do as a university. We train students. So if we wanted to convince students that this is a worthwhile type of education, we have to tell them what kind of jobs they might be able to get. So give me a few examples of the jobs that a student entering university now might be able to get 5 years from now when they're getting out of university, that they will feel this is a formidable challenge for the world, but I'm here with my education to address this challenge. So, Hugo.
Well, perhaps I start just saying that here are 4 examples of the jobs that you could have. But there are many ways to act in food security once you are trained as a new professional in this field. I was trained as a medical doctor, and I knew I was taught that whatever a capsule or a drug doesn't cure, then a knife will do, and we know what we're doing without talking to anybody else. The interdisciplinarity, the intersectoriality of the teaching that the students are receiving is something that perhaps you receive in your training. I did not at a medical school. And that opens a lot of doors. New professionals who can communicate with people in many different fields, who understand the language, who can go to international development agencies. We have students right now working with the World Food Program in Sri Lanka, others in the headquarters of FAO in Rome, and others partnering and visiting the different organizations and partners that are present in this room. The challenge of food insecurity is not going away. And the challenge of 800, and allow me to remind us about it, the 821 million people who go to bed hungry every day is only the tip of the iceberg. This is only the most severe level of food insecurity. There are other people who are food insecure as well, who might not go to bed hungry, but are eating every day the same kind of food. And this is detrimental to their health, detrimental to their ability to work, their ability to learn, their ability to develop. So this is a message that I certainly don't like to transmit to our students, but this is the reality. It's a big challenge that we are facing, and we need to understand, we need to see the problem in its whole magnitude. And the whole magnitude means also that there's a job to do here in Canada as well, and even in this neighborhood.
Excellent. Wendy, Richard, Nikita, any?
Well, just to add, yes, I completely agree, focusing on interdisciplinary efforts that a lot of the graduates here are focusing on, and thinking about how to really apply those skills in wherever your careers may take you, thinking about working for evidence-based organizations, I would say, that work for sustainable development, that have some of those priorities, and thinking ahead into the future, particularly around women and youth, focusing on programs that address issues that address the concerns of women and youth, because often when their needs are met, or when they're the focus of a program, the nutritional outcomes in a community can be quite positive. Yeah.
Excellent. Last words, Nikita?
What are the job opportunities for graduates here? I think I can think of three. One, and I think there's still a great opportunity for McGill graduates to make a substantial contribution to global food security outside of academia, in the food system. So working for the full scale of agribusiness, be it small farms to the big Cargills. There's, I think, a great opportunity to bring your technical knowledge and your evidence-based learning to these organizations and make change from within. Following up on Hugo's point, there's also the skill set of a development practitioner, knowing how to manage and implement development projects in developing countries. That's a skill set that we need more of. There hasn't been a lot of, it's been learned on the ground in doing the job, but I think there's lots of opportunities for McGill graduates. And then it's also to come and work as a donor. Like, I graduated from this campus. I'm probably the only place here I'm willing to admit that I did a PhD in earthworm communities and soil fertility, and ended up as a bureaucrat. And for the past 10 years, I've provided advice on 550 projects worth over $2 billion. So there's opportunities right across the full spectrum of the food system available. And if anyone's interested, do come and talk to me. I am short-staffed right now. So.
Excellent. Here are the jobs. Richard?
Well, I would endorse what's been said. I think for the students that are here, you can go anywhere. The rigor, the critical thinking, the holistic approach that you've been trained in here is commendable. And I think you can take that to work in government. There are certainly in our member agencies, need for people with your skills, whether you're involved on the humanitarian response, whether you're involved in food nutrition, whether you're involved in longer term development projects. There is opportunity there. There's opportunity, I think, in an evolving corporate sector. I think if you think of the Sustainable Development Goals and partnership, there are lots of companies out there that are recognizing the need for a triple bottom line or beyond that in terms of their social mandate and their social license to operate. And they need people with your skills to bring, again, that rigor, ability to communicate complex messages, evidence-based, towards solving these critical issues that are facing humanity. So I think you can go anywhere. And so when someone at your next family dinner says, what are you going to do with that degree? You should answer them, anything I want.
I think those are perfect final words. And with that, I would like to thank our distinguished panelists and give them a small present as a thank you for your participation at this panel. And this wraps up our panel discussion as well as the event here today. I would like to seize the opportunity, first of all, again, thank our panelists for a fantastic discussion. I would like to thank our distinguished participants at this event. Thank you for taking your time out of your busy schedules to be here today. This is a truly significant moment for McGill University, and even more so for this faculty and this campus. And I want to thank you, Maggie, for your visionary donation and contribution to what happens at this faculty. The name being on the Institute now will carry forward and allow us to make that impact that I believe we're able to do. Thank you. Thank you to all of you for coming.